Ontario's very first Pride picnic was held at Hanlan's Point on the Toronto Islands in 1971. And since then, the 2S LGBTQIA community has experienced struggle and success on the road to acceptance. From the bathhouse raids of the 1980s to the legalization of same-sex marriage in the 2000s to the addition of gender identity and expression to Ontario's Human Rights Code in the 2010s, here now to talk about the progress made and the challenges that remain, we welcome in the nation's capital, Callie Metler, Executive Director of Capital Pride Ottawa. In Windsor, Ontario, Derrick Biso, Director of Education and Operations at Trans Wellness Ontario. In Kingston, Ontario, Maurice Tomlinson, an activist and consultant with HIV Legal Network. And with us in studio, Cheri DiNovo, retired minister at Trinity-St Centre for Faith, Justice and the Arts, and former NDP MPP for Parkdale-High Park. Welcome, Cheri, in our studio.
Oh, it's a pleasure, thank you.
And welcome to the three for joining us online. Callie, I'm going to come to you. Your work is ramping up, of course, for the preparation of Ottawa's Pride festivities in August. What can we expect this year?
Yeah, we can expect the festival to be bigger and better than ever. Our audience numbers definitely grow year over year, and we are expecting absolutely no change this year, especially with news coming out of the States. We're looking forward to welcoming more visitors to our festival in our nation's capital. And yeah, really just making this year sparkle for all of those who celebrate Pride.
All right, and Derrick, help us understand a little bit about the work that you do. What is Trans Wellness Ontario and sort of the work that you day to day?
So we are a social service agency trying to enhance and sustain the health and wellness through individual services like counseling and peer support and group programming and drop-in events and things like that. And my role in education is really to do the education efforts of going out into the community, of offering education services and consultation services to enhance capacity, to serve and affirm, and to include. And as well as I am a drag queen who fundraises for the organization to help sustain our efforts as an organization that relies on grants and donations. A lot of my work is really just trying to sustain ourselves during this economic hardship that we're all facing.
All right, I have to ask, what is your drag name?
So I am Remedy from the House of Cures.
From the House of Cures? Ooh, I like this. Very nice.
Yeah, your friendly neighborhood drag queen.
Okay. Maurice, you wear many hats. We've just learned that, you're a nurse, but, you've always been advocating for gay rights, both in this country and out of this country for a long time. I'm curious, how has your work changed, if at all?
So it's been an interesting journey. I initially started my work with LGBTQ activism in an HIV/AIDS hospice back home in Jamaica. Then when I realized I couldn't do much there because I didn't have any medical training, I then became a lawyer and I started challenging anti-gay laws, which I continue to do across the region, with the support of the HIV Legal Network. But my interest has remained healthcare focused. So, we recently heard that the FDA has approved this wonderful twice yearly drug that will prevent HIV in those who are on it. And we have bi-monthly Cabenuva. We have wonderful advances. We're working towards a core, but there's a lot of impediments that remain. Structural, legal, societal impediments that remain for people to access these wonderful innovations. So that's where my work and the work of the HIV Legal Network continues to be. Now I am a nurse. Happy to combine my role both as a lawyer, challenging anti-gay laws, and as a nurse providing care for those who are affected by multiple life-threatening illnesses, including HIV, which still is a chronic disease which needs access for medications and care. So that's where everything I suspect will come to in the end. We need to maintain access to people for all treatments, regardless of any difference or gender or any of those things.
All right. We are going to obviously talk about some of the successes and challenges, but I want to get a better idea of what Pride was like when you were, in your younger days. So Cheri, I'm coming to you. We have a photo. This was 1971. Tell us what we're looking at there. There you are. We've outlined you in a red box there.
I've aged into blonde. I've aged into blonde, yes.
Beautifully.
Yeah, I was 21 with my then girlfriend, and Toronto Gay Action, it was a celebration, the first Pride. And there's a plaque on Hanlon's Point because it was a cruising area way before we started in 1971. So from going back to the 50s and even before, it's always been a queer positive space. But that same summer was the summer of We Demand. So the same group that I was part of, Toronto Gay Action, went to Parliament Hill. It was the first quotes unquote gay demonstration on Parliament Hill, and I was the only woman to sign on to it. First legalized same-sex marriage I was honored to do, and that was 2001 between two women of color. I always try to correct history on that. But I mean, after that, the feds picked it up. So we start things in Ontario. And the rest of the country carries on. It's wonderful.
Trailblazers. All right. Yeah. With that photo, I want to show another photo. This was 53 years later. You joined Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow at the unveiling of a plaque celebrating queer history right back at Hanlon's Point. Full circle moment. Talk about sort of being the trailblazers in this. But what was it like to be there, but also to know what it was like, 50 plus years before that?
Of course. Well, first of all, it's an honor. And I do wear my collar when I talk about queer things because we know that fundamentalist religion is behind a lot of the hate. So I like to present that, we're not all like that. But yeah, the plaque is up. But two things. I mean, the first Pride was celebration, which Pride is always and should always be. But it was also demonstration, which Pride was and should always be. So it was both two-pronged, So we celebrated, what we hadn't quite accomplished then, but then we went on to demonstrate for what we needed because it was in the same group, same summer, same, continuous kind of action. And I think that's really important to emphasize with Pride now. And you heard, the backlash is real, it's coming, it's here. It's not just in the States, it's, Alberta and Saskatchewan taking away healthcare from the most vulnerable, most at-risk children. So it's here, it's now, it's everywhere. And so it's really important to keep those two components. Yes, we celebrate what we've accomplished. It's phenomenal. It's a lot. And there are legions of people behind every one of those bills. But, we also have to keep what we've won and progress. We need more, as you heard Maurice talking about. Yeah.
With that, Maurice, I am curious, do you remember your first Pride? What was that like?
Oh, boy. So you want to know my first Pride here in Canada or my first Pride back home? Pride in Jamaica is a little different. I must point that out. So we don't do it as visibly as you do, obviously. It's still illegal to have same-sex intimacy. You can go to prison for 10 years for even holding hands in the privacy of your bedroom. And so we have to do things a little differently. So we organize Pride with a lot of secrecy. You have to go online and register. We vet your email and all of that, and it's a lot of privacy around Pride. Then we go out and do a little public demonstration, which only we know is going to happen. Nobody else, no crowds, no spectacle. Then I come to Canada, and I'm in Toronto Pride, and I was honored to be one of the international Grand Marshals at Capital Pride. And it's a very different scenario where you have not now, police and fire and all the other agencies that we wouldn't even dream of supporting our efforts back home because they're the ones that are persecuting us. So it's a very different thing, I think, to come from, the I don't want to use developing world, but the other other worlds to Canada, and to experience Pride in those two contexts. It's mind-blowing. And I'm really proud to say that I have marched in quite a few prides: Kingston Pride, Toronto Pride, Capital Pride. They all have their uniqueness about them. And the one thing I love is the fact that in Canada, we can express ourselves in this way, but we can't rest on our laurels because we can see those rights are being taken back now.
All right, Callie, I am curious, as Cheri was talking about, Ontario being sort of this, trailblazer and stuff, very different probably experiences in terms of your first Pride. I am just curious, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, my first Pride was Toronto Pride. I couldn't even put a date on it now, but it's got to be landing somewhere in the 2012s or 2013. So about, 13 years or so ago. I was pretty doe-eyed at that time in my life. I had just come out, had my first girlfriend, had, talked to my family about, my lifestyle choices and all of those complicated conversations. And I think that, what I can say that first Pride experience offered me was a lot of confirmation that I was on the right path. It was also the first time I'd seen a drag performer and had never even heard of such a thing before, right? And now here I am with a list of 150 performers I hire every year, which is just a very, fun and cool place to find myself in, especially when it comes to reflecting on, personal experiences and how we grow and change as people.
Derrick?
Oh, so my first experience actually is outside Ontario. It's Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, where I'm from. And I would have been 16 years old, and I was in drag on a float with my fellow Youth Can Do drama group. And my mom was there with my grandma, and it was incredible. PEI and Charlottetown have an incredible Pride Festival and great parade and a great history there. And then here would be Windsor, Essex. When I moved here 10 years ago, 2017 would have been my first Pride Festival, and it's incredible. We had it downtown then, and right on to the festival square overlooking the Detroit River and seeing Detroit right across. A lot of hot pavement though, and they've moved it to Lansbury Park since then, and I live for this. It's all down Ottawa Street, and all these businesses come out and support, and we land in a park for 3 days, and you can sit in the shade, you can listen to entertainers, you can visit vendors. I live there for 3 days basically. I go home to sleep, but I do come back the next day and I stay all day, and I'm just so proud. It's grown, and similar to what Callie had said, here in Windsor, Essex, what we just had announced was this year there is more funding from organizations and kind of corporate sponsors locally than there is in the years past. It's grown, as well as attendance. And so there's struggles still, and I can speak to that, but we also have so many allies and progressive supporters in Windsor, Essex in particular. And we're seeing that community support continue. And I'm very proud to be able to say that and share that, in face of what is a lot of challenges and struggle.
All right, Callie, as we mentioned, Pride hasn't always been celebratory. I want to talk to you about some of the darker parts of history. Let's talk about the LGBT purge. What exactly is that, and walk us through why that was an important part of our history.
Yeah, absolutely. The LGBT purge is a time period in Canada that is kind of captured from 1950 to 1990. Where civil servants, members of the RCMP, and folks in the military were removed, demoted, or taken off upward trajectories at their workplaces because they were thought to be a threat to the Canadian government and privacy. And all of this kind of fear around privacy and national security really came out of the Red Scare, the fear of communism, and that of course was learned in some ways too from the American context and our neighbors to the south. So there's a lot of similarities if you've heard of the Lavender Scare in the United States that were manifesting between the 50s and the 90s in Canada, and yeah, now we call that time as the purge because people were being purged out of their places of work in Canadian government. So we did see an apology for this practice, which was, I'll mention too, quite intensive. People were followed, they were surveilled, they were made to report on the activities of their friends and confidants. In order to maybe save their own position, you had to report on others' activities outside of the workplace. So there was a lot of distrust, a lot of kind of quiet, secretive conversations about what it meant to be gay and be at work during that time. So as I was saying, we did see an apology from Prime Minister Trudeau in 2017, directly citing these kinds of trials and tribulations. And I think that the other kind of thing I'll point out about all of this is that Michelle Douglas as an individual is often seen as the case that really set the precedent for the end of the purge and why it ended. So yeah, just as a final note, Michelle was kind of, as people say, the last to be purged. But the important thing to note is that there was she did take it to court and say this is not right. And there was a decision by the federal court in her favor saying, her being removed from her position is actually not aligned with human rights protections in Canada, which was a very monumental moment in Canadian history and to really, cap off this period of purging.
Derrick, I do want to talk about another stain in Ontario's history, bathhouse raids of 1981. Talk to us about this moment and sort of the aftermath. I think a lot of people think that that this was kind of centered in sort of the urban areas, but from what I understand, there are some connections to other parts of this province as well.
To Windsor as well, yeah. I will just say very quickly that if anyone wants to learn more about the Purge, the Canadian Human Rights Museum just put out this new exhibition, and Walter Cassidy, who's a local historian here in Windsor, was in a role to help build that. It's called Love in a Dangerous Time. And if you can see the exhibition at the Canadian Human Rights Museum, you can, or online. They have some incredible education materials and teacher guides and a lot of information there that is a lot pulled from the archives, which another great resource to learn more. But just to say, here in Windsor, Essex, we did have the Edna bathhouse was raided. There was a few bathhouses that have been raided. There's a lot of police repression in this area. We did have quite a big scene because of just the population and what is an urban center, but also because of Detroit. Right, in the crossover, people being able to have a lot more anonymity coming here. And before I moved here and before 9/11, really, the flow of people was really just like fish in water in some ways. There was much more ease to be able to cross and to be a part of that community as well as to be a part of this community. And so because of that, we did have a lot more here that then was also repressed and state interaction, right, to shut down those places of community gathering and to close out those opportunities to be with each other.
Cheri, what was it like to be, we're kind of going through history there, but you were living it.
I was living it, and just because of Maurice's activism, which I've seen firsthand over the years, I just wanted to mention that. But sadly, a number of sponsors have pulled out of Toronto Pride, particularly big multinationals. And so when I said that the first Pride was both celebration and demonstration, I think that one of the things that we might ask, just suggesting, of our big corporate sponsors is that they fly pride flags here and that they're very out in their support here. That's great. And I think we should love that. But what are they doing in other countries? We do have Canadian multinationals that operate, for example, in Jamaica and other places where it's illegal. Are they showing pride there? Are they flying the flags there? Are they, and down there, they have way more influence too because of their money on governments. So again, this is not just me speaking here. This is a general feeling, I think, among Pride and Pride organizers as well as Pride participants, is that maybe we should be hoping or expecting more from those who march with us. The other, 363 whatever days of the year, as well as on the day. So celebrate, celebration, demonstration. Do something with it. Action.
Great point. I do want to bring Maurice back into the conversation because I do want to talk about something that Cheri had mentioned. It's been 20 years since same-sex marriage was legalized in Canada. And of course, because we talked about Ontario, 22 years in Ontario. It seems like a long time ago, but as we know, other countries are still struggling to keep that up. How has the conversation around same-sex marriage changed over the years, Maurice?
Oh boy. The reality is that same-sex marriage galvanized the fundamentalists to challenge LGBT human rights, even more so than HIV. I was shocked because I've seen both the influx of fundamentalists when HIV was killing people, and they were using that as a justification to ban LGBT human rights. Then marriage equality, and it's just redoubled their efforts because they hate love. That's the bottom line. They hate love, and they are so vehement now that they're in Jamaica, for example, they've entrenched a ban in our constitution on any form of same-gender relationship, not even domestic partnerships or anything. And that's directly related to a Canadian who went to Jamaica to argue that they shouldn't adopt the loose human rights charter that we have in Canada in Jamaica because it would lead to the horrors of gay marriage. And, this is the influence that these fundamentalists, not only in the States, also in Canada, are having around the world. They're going all over, Tanzania, you name it, to say we cannot allow any form of same-gender relationships to be recognized. No, not even domestic partnerships, because it's going to lead to marriage equality. And that's going to lead to things which we have yet to see happen. But in their mind, the corruption of children, all of that. So it's great that we've had it in Canada. It's not progressing in other parts of the world. It's actually being used as a hammer or a sledgehammer to prevent the growth of any form of human rights for LGBT people.
All right, I want to show a clip from the agenda from 2011. This is with former Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Wynne. Have a listen.
The moms in that family shouldn't have to go into the school and read the Riot Act to the principal and say, okay, my kid's coming to your school, there are two mothers, if she's ever harassed, you know, you're going to hear from me. She shouldn't have to do that. Right now, she may still have to do that. You know, in the province, she may still have to go into the principal and say, look, this is the situation. You need to let the teachers know. But 4-year-old kids,
how often is that happening, though?
It's happening.
All right, Cheri, I'm coming to you. Are we still at a point in time where anything other than the nuclear family still has to be explained?
Well, and nice to see Kathleen. I consider her a friend now. We worked across the aisle on bills together. You know, just to say, I was the keynote for the AGM of Ontario English Catholic teachers, almost 1,000 teachers in that room. They all applauded. I wore my collar. I do a slide of 50 years of queer activism, now 54. But anyway, so I think it's really, really important that we keep. Often it's the boards for the Catholic teachers, often it's the bishops and the boards, but for all of our teachers who are supportive and inclusive, and most of the teachers' unions, I'd say all of the teachers' unions are really, we need to support those that support us in the schools, as well as our children, of course. But those teachers that are on the front lines, particularly in, you know, Alberta, Saskatchewan, where they're being asked to do, I think, make terrible moves in terms of the children's safety, don't rat them out. You know, stand up for your children. You know, be there. And I've spoken in schools where, you know, and remember, we all share. You know, people of the book, Muslims, Jews, Christians. We all share the same passages. Like, it's really important so that the kids have. I call it spiritual armor, but the teachers have it too, so that they don't get sidelined by using religion as you heard Maurice talking about, as a weapon. That is not in any of our scripture, in any of the world religions. I can argue that another show. But I mean, the reality is, like, we need to support our teachers in supporting our children, and we need to support our children. And that's going to be ongoing. It's going to be always. It's always been always. But now, again, know your rights. The law's on your side, at least here.
All right, Derrick, I want to obviously get your take on this with your involvement in the Windsor school system, but also your proximity to another country that is having some pretty intense conversations that, you know, we may say that, you know, that border protects us, but unfortunately, conversations are coming north of the border with it.
Yeah, and we're probably one of the most American of Canadian cities, right? Being and same with Sarnia and some of these other border towns. But just to say that I do think, to share what Cheri DiNovo just said, like, absolutely, we need to support our champions and champion our champions. And we have a very good relationship with our local Greater Essex County District School Board. And we have a decent relationship with our other school boards as well, the Catholic and French Catholic. And we've gotten to do PD days and be involved in education efforts. And we have Run for Rocky that does amazing fundraising, support the GSAs in our region and our community organizations. And that relationship with really encouraging those teachers and giving them boxes of supplies and really trying to bolster their spirits and keep morale high. Like, that's one of the major reasons I do the drag shows as fundraisers, is keep morale high, keep the doors open, and also talk about what are the issues affecting us, and to really, you know, engage in a lot of advocacy with our local politicians. But just to say, the influence is felt, you know, like, it's not only that we talk in Fahrenheit here, it is also that a lot of those values, a lot of that stigma, a lot of that bias is here. There's a lot of extremism. There's a lot of religious fanaticism, particularly in our county areas. And so it's an issue that we're currently working with, right? Like, I was walking down the street the other day and, you know, slurs were yelled at me as I'm just walking with my pink shiny cowboy boots. And that's the danger of right now. There's so much tension and people are very close, I think, to engaging in further violence, right? And I agree exactly what Cheri said about keeping our kids safe, because I support teens and some of them are quite young, just coming of age, and into teenagehood, and they know themselves. They're figuring it out at least. Like, they have a sense, and getting to see, because I have like 30 to 40 of them hanging out on Wednesday nights, the way that they gather and the sense of self that emerges. And a lot of these kids are isolated in their schools. They're the only queer kid they know in their school who's open, and they're being bullied every day. And the teachers and administrators are not doing enough to protect them. And that's the fear that I have, is that right now we're in a moment where we could very quickly lose a lot of gains. And certainly the gains we have are not culturally embedded within our localized culture of relationships. And so there's a lot of work that I'm doing of just trying to get us all on board to be in allyship and solidarity with each other, because like we're all struggling right now. And certainly these human rights that are trying to actually protect all of us, like everyone's gender identity is protected, everyone's sexual orientation is protected, right? These ways of being are being protected. And it's important because it is giving us so much beauty, diversity, and culture as we're more free to be ourselves, and to see how love emerges in the human population. Right. So I really appreciate being here today and just getting to say a few words, but certainly like I feel like we're on the vanguard.
I want to go back down memory lane and look at a clip from 2013 where author Andrew Solomon talks about the move from tolerance to acceptance. Have a listen.
I see that the experience of gay people is so radically different now from what it used to be. I'm involved with the Gay and Lesbian Studies program at Yale, where I studied. The person who founded the program is Larry Kramer, leading gay activist, now in his 70s. When he talks about what it was like to be gay at Yale in the 1950s, I listen to him and I think, I can't imagine how anyone could have survived that. And I'm so grateful that I was gay at Yale in the 1980s. But then I look at the students who are there now, and I see the experience they're having as they imagine marriage and family and stability and wide acceptance by their families and by everyone else around them. And I'm deeply jealous of the experience they have. And my hope is that when they come back, when they're approaching 50, they'll have the same feeling of jealousy for the next generation.
A beautiful clip there. Maurice, over a decade later, is Andrew right?
So, personal story. My son came out to me at 19. Oh. He had not had the courage to tell me. He had been kept away from me for years because family dynamics, etc., etc. Anyway, and I was so happy that, one, he came out to me in Canada, where he's now a permanent resident, working on his citizenship very slowly, but anyway. But I'm happy that he's here because, like the speaker one just said, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that he doesn't have to endure half the, pardon my French, shite that I had to endure growing up in Jamaica. He shows me way too many revealing photos of himself at raves, and I'm telling him, don't do it anymore, can't take it. But he goes to raves, you know, he's going to all the pride parades. He's having the best time he can possibly have. Me, my experience of pride, as I said, was secrecy. There was only a glimmer of hope when we would be able to go out on the street briefly. Him, oh no, there's very little left to the imagination. Both he and his mother, me and his mother are worried about that. But anyway, the point is, I am so jealous, but at the same time, so happy, so proud. And that's what gives me the energy to keep working for liberation here and there, because we are gays of a certain age. You young people are lucky, but us gays of a certain age, we have to keep the fight going so that our legacy is maintained. Because as we've seen in the States, it is not, and as a lawyer, I'm sad to say, it is not etched in stone. No human rights is permanent. You have to fight it, fight to keep it every single day.
Callie, I want to get your take as someone who is younger. You know, what, just that clip, but also what Maurice had to say.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, you know, publicly a view that Pride is a celebration. But, you know, to kind of go back to the driving question of the show, is Pride still a protest? Like, certainly advocacy is still a major part of our festival. You know, we try not to be too downtrodden all the time. So we do say, you know, this 9-day period is our time to celebrate our joy and celebrate all of the hard work that we've done throughout the year. All of that advocacy that, you know, Maurice and Cheri talks about, that we see evidenced in, you know, the black and white photos. We are, and, you know, sharing the legacy of that activism, that's certainly something that's being taken up by the younger generation, if I can put myself into that category. without too much offense here, yeah, definitely work that's being taken up and is being held with very much care and sensitivity to the very hard work that's come before us. So certainly I feel Pride is a place to celebrate all of this advocacy, but also a place to plan for future advocacy.
All right, I've only got 30 seconds left, but I do want to come to Derrick and Cheri. Derrick, I'm going to come to you first. What changes should be made today to make sure the conversation a decade from now is where you expect it to be?
I think if there's an answer to the call from the Enchante Network to make sure there's funding available for organizations across the country that serve our community, to have dedicated funding to ensure that they don't disappear. We've lost a few organizations already in the last 6 months to a year, and I'm certainly in a precarious situation with Trans Wellness Ontario and our local festivals. So it's really wanting to make sure that we have the support we need to exist. We'll always exist is our current funding campaign. We'll always exist. Make sure our trans wellness still exists as well.
All right, Cheri, you get the last one.
10th anniversary of banning conversion therapy. It was my bill, first in Canada again, based on the stories of survivors. It's not being enforced. It's still happening. Our children are still being subjected to it. It just calls something different. We have to enforce our laws. There are laws here, and we have to require of those people that participate in Pride that those laws are extended to everywhere. And it's easy to be brave when you're surrounded by 1 million people in a Pride parade. It's harder for people like Maurice and others who have to deal with other countries. We need to make Pride international, and we need to require of our multinationals that they do that. So, yeah, let's all about the children. Keep our children safe.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I would like to mention that our documentary, Parade, Queer Acts of Love and Resistance, will premiere June 22nd at 9 p.m. on TVO and on our website, tvo.org, and our YouTube channel. I want to thank you all so much. Callie, Maurice, Derrick, Cheri, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights and your stories and your inspiration and for the work that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.